Right now on Ana Cabrera reports, a region on the brink. Israel launching a massive strike on Iran's nuclear program, dropping hundreds of bombs, killing several of Iran's top military leaders, and providing an immediate retaliatory response. Now, the risks of an all-out war and how President Trump distanced his administration from the attacks straight ahead. Plus, the stunning incident in Los Angeles with a Democratic senator forcibly removed and handcuffed by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's security team. This as the president celebrates a court ruling that keeps National Guard troops on the streets of Southern California for now. It's 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York, and we begin with the breaking news in the Middle East. Israel launching a brazen attack on Iran. Hundreds of Israeli fighter jets striking dozens of targets overnight, from the capital of Tehran to far-flung missile launch sites, aiming to degrade the country's nuclear program. Israeli officials this morning confirming the barrage is not finished. The attack defying the public urging of the Trump administration to hold back as nuclear negotiations were underway. Today, the Islamic Republic retaliated with 100 drones targeting Israel, both sides digging in for more attacks, and President Trump again demanding Iran negotiate after weeks of stalled talks. Let's get more now from NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons, MSNBC military analyst, Medal of Honor recipient, retired Colonel Jack Jacobs, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin. Keir, these attacks appear to be ongoing. Bring us up to speed on the very latest from the region and Israel's calculation here. Why now?
Yeah, and all the reports are that they are ongoing, and frankly, we know that they are likely ongoing because all of the analysis was that if Israel wanted to take out, if you like, Iran's nuclear capability, it wouldn't be able to do it in just one wave of strikes. And I think that's what we're seeing. The IDF saying it carried out these strikes on those nuclear sites, but also targeting Iran's military leadership. The Revolutionary Guard chief Hossein Salami, for example, and other commanders have been killed. Iran saying this morning that 6 scientists have been killed, and state TV reporting that civilians, including children, are among the dead, though that cannot be independently verified, of course. You mentioned President Trump. He urging Iran to make a deal on its nuclear program with that post on Truth Social's warning that even more brutal Israeli attacks would follow if Iran didn't negotiate. Now, previously, President Trump had indicated that he didn't think that attacks like this would help the negotiations. That seems to have changed with these new posts by him, and saying on social media, President Trump, that the next attacks are already planned and will be more brutal. There's also a fascinating piece of reporting, according to anonymous sources in local media, saying that the Mossad spy agency began smuggling missiles into Iran several months ago, and also secretly installed explosive drones deep inside the country to lay the groundwork for this overnight attack. And NBC News has not confirmed those reports. But when we heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel overnight, he spoke in English and he was uncompromising.
And so, Colonel Jacobs, at least 3 senior...
Enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before. Steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. That is why we have no choice but to act, and act now.
Meanwhile, Iran's president, with a message to his nation this morning, saying Iran's legitimate and powerful response will make Israel regret its foolish act. Anna?
Keir, thank you. Please stay with us. You just ticked through a lot there, so let's break it down further. Colonel Jacobs, at least 3 senior military officials were killed, as well as a couple of nuclear scientists. You have the missile sites, the nuclear facilities damaged, destroyed. What's your reaction to the scope of this attack?
Well, with respect to the people involved, Israel has eliminated people in leadership positions and scientists before and has replaced them all. As a matter of fact, Iran has already named replacements for those who were killed in the attacks last night, so people can be replaced. The attack on the facilities is something else again. They went after the most vulnerable facility at Natanz, which has been attacked before, but the facility near Qom, which is deep inside a mountain, is extremely difficult to get to. And while not impervious to attack, requires different kinds of weapons and different kinds of tactics than Israel has used to date. So if it wants to eliminate, greatly reduce Iran's capability to enrich uranium to weapons grade, it will have to go after that site, and it hasn't done that yet. It's interesting to note, however, that the initial attacks had to take out Iran's anti-aircraft capability. Otherwise, the Israeli aircraft wouldn't be able to get to their targets. So that's why there are still attacks on facilities yet to come. But getting the facility at Qom is going to be extremely difficult, Anna.
Joel, President Trump had said he didn't want Israel to attack, that it could scuttle those U.S.-Iran nuclear attacks that have gone through at least 5 rounds at this point. Are you surprised Netanyahu went ahead anyway?
Well, you know, Anna, this truly was the most daring Israeli military strike since the Six-Day War, a major gamble by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And to your question about President Trump, you know, I think that he probably greenlit this strike. Now, he didn't publicly call for it. He didn't directly have American military support for it. But, you know, there wasn't a major commitment to this diplomacy by the United States. It was more of a feeling out of the diplomacy. Steve Witkoff met, talked about term sheets, threw out the idea of no enrichment, then pulled it back, was confused on his messaging. And I think this was a test. And clearly Iran didn't pass the test. And President Trump, he didn't seem to have any qualms with Israel's strike last night.
No, it does seem like he's jumped on Israel's side early this morning and continuing to offer some tough talk toward Iran. The U.S., though, officially, Colonel, has said Israel acted unilaterally. Iran's foreign minister is arguing this attack couldn't have happened without the coordination and approval of the United States. What do you think? Could this have gone down without the U.S. getting some kind of approval?
I think
yes.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Colonel.
sorry. No, it could have occurred without American assistance or approval. In the past, we've given intelligence assistance, passing on information gleaned from satellites and so on. But Israel has a capability and has demonstrated the capability of launching attacks like this on its own. To the extent that they need other weapons, Israel has demonstrated that it can manufacture its own. So, yeah, easily done by Israel, by itself, requiring absolutely no approval or assistance from the United States.
But what do we know about U.S. assets in the region and the potential risk to them and the risk that the U.S. gets drawn into this?
Yeah, well, we do have assets in the region. We've withdrawn some of them. Of course, we have strategic interests in the region, and any conflict there makes it extremely difficult for us to maintain the surveillance that we need to maintain, particularly over Houthis and others. And so withdrawing forces from the region makes it hard for us to achieve our strategic objectives there. So any volatility in the region makes it hard for us to project our power. It's unclear so far how long it's going to take for Israel to achieve what it wants to achieve. It may take a matter of days or even weeks, but during that time, it's going to be hard for the United States to project its power in the region, Anna.
Keir, can you give us a sense of what Iran might have planned in terms of retaliation? What have we seen so far? How does it compare to what we've seen in the past? And what kind of warnings are they giving this morning?
This doesn't look like the kind of retaliation that we saw previously with Iran, just in response to previous Israeli attacks. the question is going to be whether Iran simply isn't capable of a response like that yet now. As you know, just some of its proxies like Hezbollah are completely crushed, frankly. So that is going to be a question, and I guess we'll get the answer in the coming days. We are hearing that Iran has cancelled the talks that were planned for Sunday with President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. So clearly it is moving to a defensive, if not offensive position, rather than moving towards the kinds of negotiations that President Trump has called for. Another point I think just worth making too, though, is that the UN's nuclear observer has said just in the past 24 hours, interestingly, just before these strikes, that Iran was not complying with its obligations around its nuclear program. And so another question is going to be, was Iran reaching for nuclear capability anyway? Or if Israel isn't able to fully kind of demolish, if you like, Iran's nuclear program, will this push Tehran towards getting a nuclear bomb?
Yeah, the International Atomic Energy Agency is saying just this week that Iran had not complied with the nuclear obligations for the first time in about 20 years. We've seen so much video here from inside Iran and all of the damage that has occurred because of these Israeli strikes overnight. And we do know that those 100 drones were launched toward Israel almost immediately in response. Do we know if there was any damage inside Israel?
It doesn't look like it. We do hear that over Jordan, Iranian drones were shot down. And if that is the case, then that will increase the nervousness in Arab nations in the Gulf, where I am, for example, over whether Iran will turn and respond towards those nations that are partners with the United States. The Arab world has shifted quite considerably in recent years towards a more diplomatic approach to Iran. It's changed just as the White House has shifted away from a more diplomatic approach, if you like. So that will be another one of the concerns. But we really have no clear idea at this stage about how long this, as you've been saying, how long these strikes by Israel will continue. And Israel showing video of them taking out some of Iran's defenses. So it may be that Iran is, frankly, simply trying to in a position of defense right now, rather than being able to take any real offensive action.
Yeah, the Prime Minister has said that the fighting will continue as many days as it takes. Joel, President Trump posted this morning there's still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. He says Iran must make a deal. Kira is reporting those talks for Sunday are off, but do you see Iran eager to negotiate now?
You know, Anna, I don't, but I do think it's very interesting what the president said, which is to the point that Colonel Jacobs was making earlier. There still are nuclear sites in Iran, and that means that not everything has been destroyed. That means that if Iran were to go back and say at the table they want to negotiate and close a deal that meets the terms that were asked of them by President Trump, perhaps they could save some of that infrastructure. Perhaps there could be a civilian nuclear power arrangement that Secretary Rubio floated a while back. But I don't think that's likely. I think that the Iranians are going to look at this as the end of diplomacy from their perspective. But of course, that means that they could very well invite, and likely will invite, additional Israeli strikes on an ongoing basis for the foreseeable future.
Israel launches massive preemptive strikes on Iran's nuclear program, escalating to regional war. Trump's public posturing contradicts earlier diplomatic calls, now cheerleading devastation. The attacks' surgical brutality and claims of Mossad infiltration feel like a calculated provocation. Civilian casualties dismissed. This is not defense, it's chaos, with Trump fueling the fire.
More breaking news overnight. An appeals court pausing a lower court's ruling that gave control of the California National Guard back to Governor Gavin Newsom. That means President Trump will be able to keep the California National Guard active on the streets of Los Angeles for now, as more immigration and Trump protests are planned over the weekend. And that legal battle plays out as there's new fallout after this dramatic scene. Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California forcibly grabbed and removed from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's press conference yesterday. And take a look at this. After being pulled out of that room, the senator is then pushed to the floor, and 3 officials hold him down, handcuffing his hands behind his back. A sitting U.S. senator being handcuffed for the whole world to see. NBC News correspondent David Noriega is live in Los Angeles. Also with us, MSNBC legal analyst Carol Lamb. She's a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of California and former California Superior Court judge. Carol, let's start with these overnight court rulings. As of now, the California National Guard is still under President Trump's control, at least until Tuesday when the appeals court has set this hearing. What do you make of where we are right now?
Well, Anna, this wasn't completely unexpected that the appellate court was going to step in and perhaps put a pause on the district court judge's ruling that came out yesterday. They did it very quickly, but even Judge Breyer on the district court said he wasn't going to have it take effect. He wasn't going to have his ruling take effect until noon today, suggesting that he expected there would be an appeal by the government, and that the Ninth Circuit would perhaps want a chance to weigh in here. What this really does is it puts a stay on Judge Breyer's ruling. Everything is as it was before. However, I do think that both sides are aware that the conduct that takes place over the next few days could, in fact, impact the Ninth Circuit's evaluation of the case here, and perhaps there will be a little pulling back on both sides to make sure that they aren't viewed as going overboard in the intervening days.
So Judge Breyer, again, the brother of Justice Breyer, he is this lower court judge who ruled for California before the appeals court had paused it, and he did not mince words. Judge Breyer saying, quote, "We're talking about the president exercising his authority, and the president is, of course, limited to his authority. That's the difference between a constitutional government and King George." Carol, this judge ruled very quickly, and he actually went beyond what the state had asked for. He called the president's actions pertaining to the National Guard illegal. Where do you think this is headed, and how long could this legal battle end up lasting?
Well, it may not seem like things are moving very fast to people on the ground, but for the court system, this actually is pretty fast. The Ninth Circuit said the state can actually file their papers on Sunday, and then the federal government can file their papers on Monday, and then there will be oral argument by Zoom on Tuesday. So there will probably be a decision from the appellate court sometime maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. Maybe it will go longer than that. But then there will undoubtedly be an appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can decide to accept that case for appeal, or it may decide not to. That remains to be seen. But if the Supreme Court decides to take this issue up on appeal, that will have a slightly longer briefing schedule because, of course, what the Supreme Court says applies everywhere in the nation.
Yeah, David, as these court cases are playing out, protests continue in Los Angeles, multiple arrests. Did we see any major clashes last night?
No major clashes last night, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I just want to show you, as I was watching this legal battle play out last night, what I was wondering was, here where the National Guard troops have been posted up for the last week, when I come out tomorrow morning, will I see them here or not? And as you can see, here they are. That remains unchanged. The dynamic of the protests, what we've been seeing is protesters coming out in the late afternoon and into the evening. The numbers have been dwindling, but they're still substantial, protesters in the several hundreds. And there are, the atmosphere has become very peaceful, very celebratory, pretty joyous. And then going into the evening, there are some tense moments, confrontations, and usually arrests numbering in the dozens from local law enforcement, the LAPD. I do think the confrontations that do happen more as a result of the pretty overwhelming and aggressive posture of law enforcement in the face of these protests rather than the behavior of the protesters themselves. What I've observed is that law enforcement isn't allowing protesters to gather in one place for a very substantial period of time at all before they start kettling them, displaying pretty quickly resorting to less lethal munitions, and bringing in mounted troops, that kind of thing, and just trying to clear people. That means that the tactics have shifted a little bit to more kind of wildcat marches where these groups of people move quickly down the streets of downtown LA. Going into the weekend, Anna, the stakes are extremely high. The stakes are very high for this legal battle about the deployment of the National Guard, but the stakes going into the weekend for these protests are tremendous. The people that I'm talking to in this growing movement, in the civil society groups that have contributed to this movement, both in years past and today, they feel like this is a huge moment for them. Either they will come out in massive numbers and protest peacefully, or things will devolve, as they did last weekend, into disorder. And which direction that goes will determine which side of this, increasingly heated political confrontation proves to be on, the higher ground in terms of whether the National Guard is justified in being here, and whether the Marines are justified in being here, and which way public opinion goes with respect to these increasingly aggressive immigration enforcement operations we're seeing not just here in Southern California, but around the country. Anna.
Yeah, this is a big test for our country. David Noriega and Carol Lamb, thank you both.
A U.S. senator thrown to the ground and handcuffed on American soil for speaking up. Trump's control over the National Guard upheld as protests simmer. The authoritarian imagery is undeniable. DHS acting like a secret police force. Democracy looks fragile when dissent is met with brute force and political theater.
Welcome back. In just the next hour, President Trump is set to sit down with his national security team as they monitor Israel's attack on Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile sites. Military commanders and nuclear scientists also killed in those strikes. In a statement overnight, Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying, "We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region." Meantime, this morning, President Trump has posted a number of times on all of this, saying he gave Iran a chance to make a deal on its nuclear capabilities, but they, quote, just couldn't get it done. I'm going to bring in NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page. Vaughn, our colleague Garrett Haake just spoke to the president. What did he tell him?
In part, he took some ownership for the attacks by noting the equipment that was used by the Israelis was American equipment, saying, quote, they had the finest equipment in the world, which is the American equipment. Of course, his message is coming out this morning upon sunrise here, including in this social media post in which he says, quote, they are all dead now and it will only get worse, is effectively a backing up of the Israeli airstrikes on Iran. For the Trump administration last night, in the immediate aftermath and hours of these strikes, the Secretary of State, for one, Marco Rubio, was explicit that these were unilateral actions that were taken by Israel. And while the White House was aware that these attacks were going to unfold, distanced themselves from the actual operations. But this morning, the president has struck a different tenor. Of course, all of this is happening, Anna, before talks were set to go underway. The sixth round of talks between Steve Witkoff and the Iranians about a potential nuclear agreement. Those talks, about 48 hours from now, were set to commence. So there's serious questions about the future there and the positioning of the president in terms of his relationship with Israel, who went forward with these strikes, despite the president and his White House hoping to have success with those negotiations.
Right. Susan, let me read more from the president's post this morning. He says the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come, and they know how to use it. That's a chunk of what you're seeing there, that long post he put out this morning. Susan, as Vaughn pointed out, for the past couple of days, the president's been saying he wanted Israel to hold back, but now he seems to be aligned with Netanyahu. What do you make of it?
Well, it could be that he's changed his tune because the circumstances have changed with the Israeli attack going forward. It's also possible, and there's speculation about this in the region, that the United States was deliberately seeming to engage in diplomacy as a kind of deflective tactic while Israel prepared to attack. We don't know if that's true. I've seen reports about that out of Israel. But in any case, Trump has come down clearly on the side of Israel on this, whatever his intentions before, even if he was quite serious about his appeals to Netanyahu to not do this while these diplomatic talks were still going on, Anna.
Susan, the president said he gave Iran a chance to make a deal, and he told them in the strongest of words to just do it, but they couldn't get it done. He was, of course, referencing the ongoing nuclear negotiations. What does that tell you? Did President Trump's negotiation strategy just ultimately fail here?
Well, it hasn't worked so far. And this after being so critical of President Biden for failing to get an Iran deal, for failing to settle the Ukraine-Russia war. It turns out that governing is really hard. Now, the position of the Israeli government is this may facilitate negotiations because Iran will be so weakened and its nuclear program so degraded that they will have little choice but to reach a deal that suits the United States and Israel. We'll see if that's what happens next.
Vaughn, Israel's defense minister set to speak with Defense Secretary Hegseth today. What can we expect from that meeting?
It's important to note that the U.S. military and Israel's IDF have long-standing relationships in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of allowing Israel to use, to a certain extent, U.S. military bases, including there in the Middle East. And so for these two men, there is going to undoubtedly be a conversation about the U.S.'s commitment to defending Israel, but also the extent to which, if Iran does in fact retaliate, what the U.S.'s military support looks like going forward here. It was made clear by Israeli ambassador to the U.S. this morning on Morning Joe that Israel intends to, quote, annihilate the nuclear enrichment program of Iran. Just how far is the U.S. willing to go to seek to carry that out? There are questions about whether Israel has the military capabilities to root out and destroy some of these nuclear facilities that are far underground. Last October, I should note, Anna, it was at the time several hundred airstrikes and missiles were exchanged between Israel and Iran. And then candidate Trump made it clear that the reason that those airstrikes were going between the two countries was because, quote, of a lack of respect for the United States of America. This is now on this White House to sort this out. And undoubtedly, those conversations with the defense minister from Israel are going to be important ones.
Susan, what do you see as on the line for the Trump administration? This is a president who has, talked about the U.S. not being involved and heavy-handed in other conflicts around the world, trying to end conflicts to create peace. But this appears to be a major escalation in a very, very fiery region.
Well, you saw the caution in Secretary of State Rubio's statement that we didn't have anything, we didn't participate in the strikes, and that our interests there are to protect United States assets in the regions. But the fact is, we are an ally of Israel. If there is a bigger, broader war in the region, it will be very difficult for the United States not to be engaged on Israel's side. And that is a message that I think would not be received well by some of the MAGA forces who really endorse this America First policy that says the U.S. should not take this kind of role in the world.
Susan Page and Vaughn Hilliard, thank you both for your reporting and analysis.
Trump backpedals from diplomacy to chest-thumping war cheerleader. Now praising Israeli airstrikes and boasting about American-made weapons, he erases any pretense of neutrality. His "they are all dead now" post is beyond chilling. It's reveling in bloodshed. MAGA foreign policy isn't strategic. It's unhinged and dangerously escalatory.
When is enough enough? When they feel no repercussions for putting a United States senator in handcuffs for the audacity to ask a question and to speak up for fundamental rights and due process. When is enough enough?
That was Democratic Senator from California, Alex Padilla, sitting down with NBC's Jacob Soboroff last night, just hours after being handcuffed and forcibly removed from a DHS news conference. This shocking video capturing the latest political clash amid a week of immigration crackdown tension. Padilla trying to question Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and then agents take him into the hall, push him face forward onto the floor, his hands behind his back. The White House is calling his detainment a theater kid stunt. DHS saying officers acted appropriately to protect Noem. But tensions are high on Capitol Hill, where two members of Congress were fighting about this incident, even trading profanities on the House floor. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now from the Hill. Ryan, tell us more about the reaction there.
Well, it was swift, Anna. Almost immediately as the video started popping up on people's phones across Capitol Hill, you saw Democrats react with very strong words, many taking to the Senate floor. We saw members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus come from one side of the Capitol to the other, demanding an audience with the Senate Majority Leader John Thune and the House Speaker Mike Johnson. Democrats do not want to just let this go. They believe that this was an inappropriate action by the Department of Homeland Security and Secret Service, and they want to see an investigation and there to be repercussions as a result of this. Listen to how they responded.
Mr. President, I just saw something that sickened my stomach. The manhandling of a United States senator. We need immediate answers to what the hell went on.
They didn't just assault the physicality of Alex Padilla. They did not succeed in assaulting his dignity. I know he rose off that ground with the same dignity he had before they threw him upon it. What they assaulted today is the dignity of this body. What is in question now is the truth of who we are and what we stand for. This is an abuse of power.
Now, most Republicans don't feel the same, save for one, Lisa Murkowski, who said that she saw the clip yesterday and said it was horrible. For the most part, though, we're seeing Republicans back up the administration and the Department of Homeland Security as this whole scene plays itself out here on Capitol Hill, Anna.
Ryan, some security experts have said Noam's team did what they had to do, what the protocols are. They said he didn't identify himself, although we can hear him say his name in the clips we've seen. Some Republicans are talking now about censuring Padilla. What is that conversation looking like?
Yeah, and this could be a potential showdown between the House side of the Capitol and the Senate side of the Capitol. It was the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, who has no role in how the Senate conducts its business, who suggested a censure should be on the table. Listen to what he said yesterday, and you can hear in the background Democratic members of Congress forcefully pushing back. Take a listen.
I think the senator's actions, my view is it was wildly inappropriate. You don't charge a sitting cabinet secretary, and everybody can draw their own conclusions. You can see it's a heated debate here.
People heckling you here, Mr. Speaker?
I'm not going to respond to that. Look, let me just hold on. Wait just a second. I think the American people can draw their own conclusions. They saw a senator acting like wildly inappropriate. I'll leave it at that. I think that behavior at a minimum is it rises to the level of a censure.
And we take a look at the number of U.S. senators that have been censured over the years, and you can see the reasons that they were censured. They were usually far outside of the bounds of what we see happening here, especially when the issues as to what happened are somewhat in dispute. Now, we should keep in mind, this was the House Speaker calling for censure. He cannot compel that to happen on the Senate side. We know that the response from Senate Republicans have been much more muted, particularly the response from the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who told our team yesterday as he was leaving that he had a conversation with Senator Padilla about this incident. How Senate Republicans choose to respond to this is still an open question, but it's very clear that Senate Democrats are not ready to just let it all go away, Anna.
Ryan Nobles, thanks for that reporting. And now we're going to turn to more breaking news. The market's down this morning in the wake of Israel's strikes on Iran and renewed fears of a broader regional war after Iran's nuclear sites were targeted. You can see the Dow now down 661 points. Joining us now is NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. What are the big takeaways emerging here? Which markets are we watching specifically? Which sectors?
Well, spiking oil markets here is the really big thing to watch. And you see the stock markets are near the lows of the day, but those oil prices up some 8%. Heightened geopolitical tensions, never good for the oil market. And what's so fascinating, it's been lower energy prices that have helped keep a lid on inflation. So now you have flaring tensions in the Middle East kind of threatening to undo some of the good news we've heard in the last few days on the inflation story. Stocks here down to the Dow down about 600 points. And this is, again, coming off of a pretty decent run from those April lows on tariff fears. Now you have more geopolitical tensions, a new kind of worry to put in a basket of international worries. And so that's what you're seeing, a kind of a classic response in the markets to geopolitical concerns.
I mean, this is uncertainty stacked upon uncertainty here. What will you be watching in the next few days?
What's so fascinating to me is we just got a reading on the consumer that was actually better than expected. Remember how sour people were saying they felt in May and in April because of tariff worries? Well, actually, people are starting to feel a little bit better because the president had backed off of some of the worst of his threats. Now you have a new concern added into this picture with rising oil prices. So I'll be watching oil prices. Do they stay at these lofty levels? And how quickly does that feed into maybe higher inflation for consumers in the days and weeks ahead?
And of course, I think oil prices, meaning gas prices, are something to watch as well. And we know that the gas prices have been going down, which has been nice for a lot of us. Thank you so much, Christine.
A senator assaulted, yet GOP leaders want him censored. The footage is sickening. Padilla attacked for demanding answers. Republicans twist reality, painting victims as aggressors. Only a few dare to dissent. This isn't about protocol, it's about silencing opposition. When power abuses go unchecked, democracy doesn't erode, it implodes.
This morning, aviation experts from all around the world are investigating what caused the Air India jet to crash. That deadly tragedy happening just moments after takeoff, killing more than 140 people on board and dozens on the ground. Incredibly, one man on that plane survived. He was able to walk away from this crash. And he is now speaking out from his hospital bed. Let's go to NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello, who covers aviation. Tom, what are we learning about this crash and how this man survived?
Yeah, and he says he was simply there sitting in his seat, and suddenly everything opened up and he was able to crawl out and escape. But there are 1,100 Boeing Dreamliner 787s in the world right now, including in the United States. In the plane's nearly 15 years since it was certified, there has never been an accident until this disaster. And among the many questions now, how did that single passenger out of 242 people on board, how did he walk away with just minor injuries? Overnight in India, authorities have been sifting through the crash site. Now the world's worst commercial airliner crash in more than a decade. The chilling moment from Thursday's crash captured from multiple camera angles. Flight 171 slamming back down to the ground just seconds after taking off, bursting into a massive ball of fire and smoke after crashing directly into student housing for a medical college. Several people on the ground are presumed dead. Of the 242 on board the flight, Air India says just a single passenger is the lone survivor. Video shows that passenger, Vishwas Ramesh, a British national who was seated in 11A, an exit row window seat, who somehow managed to walk away from the disaster. Later taken to a hospital with minor injuries and talking to a local broadcaster this morning.
I can't explain. Everything happened in my eye. Emergency door is broken. My seat is broken.
Did the aircraft catch fire before you came out?
Yes. A little bit fire. After me, I'm out. Then blast. I'm not jumping. I just walk out. It's medical, everything.
For investigators, the plane's flight data recorder will be crucial. Boeing 787 Dreamliners have an advanced set of sensors that transmit a constant stream of data from the plane to a central hub. Experts point to video that shows the landing gear still down when it should have been retracted. And the wing flaps needed for lift at takeoff did not appear to be fully extended.
These sophisticated airplanes have what they call configuration warning horns, which really let the crew know that they're not properly configured whenever they add power for takeoff. So the flap issue is a mystery to me.
Yeah, so that really is going to be one of the focuses of this investigation. They now have recovered one of the black boxes. If it's the flight data recorder, all the better, because that will give them the data, the parameters, to tell them were the flaps set properly, what was the speed setting, what was the weight, what was the temperature. There's a whole lot that goes into that. And as we've said, this was a U.S.-built plane, right? So Boeing's a part of the investigation. The FAA, the NTSB will have a role. A British team is on the way because this plane was headed to London, but ultimately the Indian authorities are in charge of this investigation. So it's going to be a busy, busy time, Anna.
And we all need the answers. Tom Costello, thank you very much.
The harrowing crash of a Dreamliner, leaving only one survivor, raises urgent questions. A miracle escape amid devastation. Faulty flaps, human error? With a US-built plane at the center, Boeing's safety oversight is once again in the spotlight. The public deserves answers, not corporate spin. Accountability can't crash too.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York. Let's get right to the breaking news. The dramatic escalation in the Middle East, igniting new fears of a larger war in the region. Overnight, Israeli forces unleashed a brutal new barrage of attacks on targets inside Iran, striking the nation's main nuclear enrichment facility, killing several top military officials. Iran firing back, launching about 100 drones toward Israel. And right now, our eyes are on the White House, where the president is expected to meet with his national security team this hour. And in just the last hour, in a phone call with my colleague, Garrett Haake, President Trump praised the manner in which the strikes were conducted. When asked what this means now for potential future talks with Iran, the president tells NBC News, quote, "They missed the opportunity to make a deal. Now they may have another opportunity. We'll see." We have our reporters and analysts covering every angle this morning. Joining us now, NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons, retired U.S. Army General Wesley Clark, who previously served as NATO Supreme Allied Commander, and Aaron David Miller, former State Department Middle East negotiator and Carnegie Endowment for International Peace Senior Fellow. Keir, lay out what we know after this volley of attacks between Israel and Iran.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's military calls this the first stage. It describes it as preemptive, precise, and a combined offensive. As you mentioned there, Anna, Israel says it hit dozens of targets in different areas of Iran, military leadership, military bases, and nuclear sites. Iran firing around 100 drones towards Israel's territory, many of which were intercepted, according to Israel. In fact, we have video now, just the latest from the Israeli Defense Forces, that it says shows the Israeli Navy intercepting drones, UAVs launched by Iran. You see those grainy pictures. We can't confirm what it is, of course, but it's clear that Israel not only prepared these attacks, not only is preparing to continue these attacks, but prepared to intercept any Iranian response. Again, the Israeli Defense Force saying that it killed a number of military leaders, including the Revolutionary Guard chief Hossein Salami and other commanders. Interestingly, it says that it identified those senior commanders from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps gathering in an underground command center. A little glimpse, perhaps, of the timing of this and the way that Israel decided that why Israel may have decided that it wanted to act now. And another aspect, of course, that the UN nuclear watchdog said just hours before the attack, unrelated to the attack, of course, that Iran had been effectively defying the expectations from that body for its nuclear program. So now, as you mentioned, waiting for President Trump to for that national security meeting there in Washington, and for more from President Trump, though he already has indicated that there could be further attacks that would be even more brutal if Iran doesn't negotiate.
And so are more strikes expected at this point, Keir, as well as any more retaliation from Iran?
Oh, I think there will be more strikes. Two reasons for that. We're seeing some, we're hearing of them, but also because anyone you would ask before this would say, anyone, that in order to try to, if you like, take out Iran's nuclear capability, you wouldn't be able to just do it in one night. And in fact, there were those who would argue or have argued that you needed US munitions in order to fully kind of defang Iran's nuclear capability. And that is going to be one of the big questions. Is Israel capable of doing that? And if it isn't, does this action push Iran towards wanting a nuclear weapon, wanting it more, perhaps? The Israelis would absolutely argue that Iran was already reaching for that, and that this is all about preventing that.
General Clark, this barrage of strikes seemed to take Iran by surprise, and we're getting more details this morning. The AP's reporting that Mossad, Israel's intelligence unit, was able to smuggle weapons into Iran ahead of these attacks that were then used to target its defenses from within. What does that tell you? What does the broader attack tell you about the level of sophistication within Israel's military?
Oh, it was extremely well done, and it's not over. The fact that they could get the drones in, that they could take out some of the retaliatory measures that Iran had, that they could take out remaining radars, air defense sites, so that their aircraft could penetrate successfully. A very, very complex, very sophisticated operation. And I'm certain that the Israeli military understands that they've got to finish the job now. So it's not just a matter of knocking on the door of Natanz. You're going to have to go in there. You're going to have to take out everything. There are a lot of other sites, many of them underground, some located in positions where bombs and missiles can't get in there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Israeli teams in there on the ground in the coming days and weeks. And then you're left, Anna, with this question. So this is in a regime that for 45 years has insisted that its entire purpose of existence was to destroy the people of Israel. So I think if you were on the Israeli side, you'd say, we've started this, we're going to finish this. And I think it's going to certainly an effort to end it with regime change and put a much more Western, more friendly, more compatible group of people in charge.
Wow, that is taking it to a whole new level. But we have heard Netanyahu imply that they're going to take this to some kind of logical conclusion. We don't know exactly what that is. You mentioned Natanz specifically. I want to let our viewers know that that is the location of Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility. And Aaron, this appears to be the first time Israel has successfully hit Iran's nuclear facilities. What does this mean for Iran? What does this mean for Israel and the region? Aaron, we're having some audio issues with you. Double check your mute button on your end. As he works through that, do we have you, Aaron? No such luck. No such luck just yet. General Clark, let me come back to you, because as you look at the U.S. response to all this right now, President Trump has posted this morning on social media, quote, 2 months ago, I gave Iran a 60-day ultimatum to make a deal. They should have done it. Today is day 61. And then he also posted that the U.S. makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. General, do you see a scenario here where the U.S. gets involved in this fight?
Well, first of all, I think you have to give the administration a lot of credit for moving the diplomacy forward. I'm sure the administration knew what Israel's plans were. And I know from discussions with people in the region that our forces are there, we're staged, we're ready to protect ourselves or do much more if necessary. So I think it's going to come out as a classic diplomatic military, which may reach a really successful conclusion. It's too early to say now. No one's mentioned Russia in this. Russia and Iran have a strategic relationship. Russia had earlier offered to take all of the enriched uranium out of Iran. Putin has played an important role in the Democratic administration's efforts in the 2015 agreement. Russia was critical in that. So we don't know where Russia stands on this as this goes forward, as more strikes continue, as pressure builds. We also haven't heard from the nations in the region. Are they concerned? A lot of airline traffic has been stopped. Straits of Hormuz, so far as we know, are still open. Oil shipments are continuing so far. So this is we're at the early stages of this in all probability now.
Iran's nuclear facilities being a big piece of this cure is, I think, concerning to so many of us. What type of safety concerns have arisen, given that at least one of their major nuclear facilities is now compromised? We know the International Atomic Energy Agency is monitoring the situation, right?
Yeah, it is. The UN watchdog, yeah, it is. And it does say so far there's no sign of increased radioactive levels. So that will be some reassurance. you don't necessarily, when you hit a nuclear site, cause a nuclear reaction, if you like. It doesn't necessarily, that's not necessarily one follows the other. You can understand why people would worry about that. But we have now Iran's president saying a message to his nation today that Iran's legitimate and powerful response will make Israel regret its foolish act. I mean, that's what has people really most worried. In this region, for example, where I am in the Gulf, many of these countries have shifted in recent years from an adversarial relationship with Iran to a diplomatic relationship with Iran. But still, though, just as example, Jordan, there were reports from Jordan that some of those Iranian drones were shot down, and that will raise concerns that Iran might respond against some of the U.S. partners in this region.
Aaron David Miller is back with us now. I think, Aaron, we have your audio fixed. Just weigh in your thoughts on these strikes and the state of play in the region now.
I mean, look, I think this happened as a consequence of the fact that Israelis believe, this prime minister, that there would never be a better opportunity than to do this. They demonstrated escalation dominance over their enemies, including the Iranians. That is the ability of the Israelis to control the pace, the focus, the intensity of military action, and prevent their adversaries from escalating. We still haven't seen an Iranian response. It took them weeks to respond, and now I think their efforts to coordinate are limited. The key factor, though, Anna, I think, is the reaction of an American president who may have had some doubts when he was briefed on this operation days before it happened, while still maintaining the fiction, purposefully, I think, that there would be a round of negotiations this Sunday, which lulled the Iranians into a false sense of security. This president basically, when confronted with the possibility that this could blow up a negotiation, basically acquiesced and enabled the Israelis to mount this extraordinary campaign. And now, having succeeded, the operation beyond, I think, the president's wildest expectations, he's now riding the tiger. So I don't expect any negotiations. The president continues to say, and they're holding open the possibility that the Iranians will show up in Oman to negotiate. But look, in the end, and General Clark, I think, said it pretty well, they've invested $5 trillion in this nuclear program. It has become a symbol of national prestige and honor, and now it's going to become an element of national security, because when all is said and done, if this regime stays in power, I suspect it will, the Iranians will probably make a decision to go all out in an effort to weaponize. And the Americans and the Israelis are going to have to figure out over time how to deal with that.
So clearly, Aaron, you see it a little bit differently than General Clark does. And General Clark sees this leading to regime change in Iran, that is the logical conclusion of days and potentially weeks more conflict. Aaron, how do you see this resolving if it isn't regime change?
Well, look, this is a war between two countries that do not share contiguous borders. The amount of damage that Israel can do, even though great, is separated by 1,200 kilometers. And the amount of damage the Iranians can do to the Israelis is limited as well. If the Iranians choose just to respond against Israel, do not attack American bases in Iraq, do not go after Saudi oil installations or American forces in the Gulf. I mean, I know this sounds counterintuitive because everybody thinks we're on the verge of a major regional war. I don't see that happening. It may well be. You are going to have a war. It's going to continue for months as the Iranians plot, try to triangulate using asymmetrical power and terror to attack Israeli targets. But I suspect this regime, having survived since '79, will likely continue in power. And what you're going to have, I think, is now a forever war waged on any number of fronts, with the Iranians not having a whole lot of cards to play against an Israel backed by the United States. And I might add, the Americans deployed F-15s to Jordan in an effort to help intercept drones with special packages of interceptors. So at this National Security Council meeting, I'm sure the president is in order of priority. How do you protect Americans? How do you defend Israel? And how do you better integrate a regional response to whatever the Iranians may intend? So this is a very long movie. I rarely disagree with General Clark. I think the odds of regime change right now could be wrong. It could happen, and when it happens, it might happen very quickly. I'm not sure we're going to be faced with an Iranian regime that's any different than the one we see right now. If anything, it may become more militarized and more influenced by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps over the mullahs.
Okay, got to leave it there for now. Conversation certainly to be continued as this is a developing situation. Aaron David Miller, General Wesley Clark, and Keir Simmons, thank you all.
As Israel toots precision, the death toll rises, and Trump promises more brutal strikes if Iran doesn't submit. Mossad's alleged sabotage suggests premeditated escalation. Diplomacy is dead. Warmongering reigns. The GOP's silence is complicity. When war becomes spectacle and cruelty is policy, who are we pretending to be? When leadership fails, bombs fall. A nation at the brink and a president playing politics. There's a dangerous kind of chaos that masquerades as strength, a pattern we've seen time and again from leaders who mistake brute force for strategy. What we're witnessing now, in the wake of Israel's calculated blitz on Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, is not just an international crisis, it's a masterclass in failed diplomacy, moral abdication, and political exploitation. Let's start with the facts. Hundreds of Israeli airstrikes have pummeled Iran, killing top commanders, scientists, and, reportedly, civilians, including children. This wasn't a warning shot. It was a decapitation strike, a clear, chilling escalation. And while Israel claims it's about preventing Iran from reaching nuclear capability, this move has done more to destabilize the region than to protect it. President Trump, ever the showman, initially distanced himself. "Hold off," he said, until the bombs dropped. Now, he's embracing it. "They are all dead now, and it will only get worse," he posted on social media. That's not statesmanship, that's sociopathic glee in death. Worse yet, he brags that Israeli strikes were executed with the finest American equipment. Translation: he's claiming credit without taking responsibility. And while bombs fall abroad, authoritarianism marches at home. In Los Angeles, Senator Alex Padilla was tackled, handcuffed, and thrown to the floor by federal agents. His crime? Asking questions, standing for due process. For this, he was publicly humiliated, treated like a criminal in his own country. And what did the White House say? They called it a theater kid stunt. That's not leadership. It's mockery. Republican lawmakers didn't denounce the attack on Padilla, they doubled down. Some even called for his censure. So let's get this straight. A sitting U.S. senator is assaulted for exercising free speech, and he's the one being targeted for discipline. This is gaslighting at a constitutional level. Meanwhile, the California National Guard remains under Trump's control thanks to a rushed court ruling. The streets of LA are patrolled by military forces, not to protect from foreign threats, but to intimidate protesters rallying against the president's immigration agenda. These aren't peacekeepers. They're props in a dystopian play. And while Americans debate the legality of deploying troops on U.S. soil, our foreign policy has become a weapon of political performance. Trump's administration claims the Israeli strikes were unilateral, but everything from the intelligence reports to the use of US-made arms suggests coordination. Reports of Mossad agents smuggling drones into Iran and staging internal sabotage only deepen the suspicion. This wasn't improvisation, it was orchestration. Add to that the deeply unsettling tone shift from Trump, shifting from passive diplomatic language to apocalyptic threats of future, more brutal attacks. He's not just amplifying war, he's commodifying it for political capital. While negotiators were still packing their briefcases for Sunday's talks, Trump was already planning the next wave of destruction. Diplomacy wasn't sidelined. It was deliberately sabotaged. Let's be clear, none of this is about protecting America. This is about ego, power, and control. It's about distracting from domestic failures by fanning the flames of war abroad and unleashing authoritarianism at home. Even the markets know what's coming. Oil prices spiked, stocks tanked, and we all know what happens next. Higher prices at the pump, inflation creeping up, middle-class Americans footing the bill for yet another political stunt masquerading as strategy. The United States once prided itself on global leadership rooted in values. Today, we're watching that legacy unravel. One drone at a time, one arrest at a time, one lie at a time. This isn't strength, it's surrender to violence, to authoritarianism, and to a president who measures success not by lives saved, but by how loud the explosions are.